Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, good morning, and good night, everyone, whenever you watch this video. I'm Ismail Mubarak. I'm a third-year student of English Education Department at Kaharuddin State Islamic University, Makassar. Here, I would like to present the material about psycholinguistics regarding language perception. There will be about 8 questions that I'll be explained here, so let's take a look at it. Well, the first question, so let's get started. What do you know of language perception? What phenomena can be used to represent the language perception? Well, when we talk about language perception, I would like to take a look from one of the experts, which is Fentanya et al. In 1998, view that language comprehension, or we can say language perception, is a process carried out in a person's mind to present information that takes him as a listener from sensory input to meaning interpretation. From that definition, I can understand that language perception related to the process in human mind to understand the meaning. So when we talk about language perception, it's about something in our mind, how we try to understand the language. Well, to illustrate my point, one of the phenomena is that in human mind, they try to recognize and understand what the utterance that people produce. So it's the process of the language perception. For example, there is a similarities between two linguistic structures where when we find it, we would like to understand that it have a similar meaning, but have a different sentences. To be specific, take a look at these two examples. I don't like you and I hate you. Those sentences have a similar meaning, but use different words. When we hear about it, I don't like you and I hate you, there will be two kind of interpretation in our mind, but at the end, we will find the same meaning because they have the same the same meaning to be conveyed there. And to recognize it, this phenomena can be used to represent language perception because to recognize the message, there is a process in our mind that is need to be processed, which is language perception. And the next one is, what do you know about language perception stages? Well, in language perception, there are about 4 stages occur. The first one is perception stage. Stage to notice sound elements. Perception stage as a process in mind from what we hear in our ears into unit of speech sound, either phonetically or phonologically. So in this stage, we hear something, and then something that we hear come to our ears and become a speech sound that we consider as a phonetically and phonologically. In this stage, there are 2 important factors that can help us to process what we hear in auditory input. Auditory input is something that we hear to our ears. IDAS performance refers to how our ears perceive the sound to be processed in minds. And the second one is competence, refers to our knowledge of language about words and sounds in our mental dictionary. So it's regarding the factors that can help us in this process of perception stages. The next one is word recognition stage. This stage is about identifying the word. After our mind receives auditory input in the perception stage, then drive to this stage to find relevant words, the mental lexicon, to recognize speech sound here. When we hear the speech sound, our mind in word recognition will try to recognize what the various words that would be relevant to the speech sound that we hear, in which it will become a lexical representation, and after become a lexical representation, which is represent the auditory input, then we choose it to be used. The next stage, parsing stage, stage to identifying the sentences, which the process to assembling words that have been recognized in the perception stage. Well, this stage would attribute appropriate meaning of each word that perceived from auditory input, the sentence that can be understood and acceptable in mind with well structure. So after we choosing the best word, the appropriate word regarding the auditory input that we got, in the parsing stage, we would like to make it into one sentences and try to make it more understandable and acceptable for us, which is these sentences represent the auditory input that we got. And the last one is interpretation stage. Stage to understanding the meaning, where it shows understanding of the speech here when communicating. Well, people communicating well, it means that they understand what they convey about, and it's about interpretation stage. It also takes place in semantical aspect of speech about how the mind comprehends what the utterance delivers in the speech sound. It means that the semantical aspect about how the mind can understand the utterance that we deliver in the speech sound. Well, next is, in your opinion, is word recognition a complex process? Why? Explain your reason. Well, in my point of view, I see word recognition as a complicated mental process. Besides some factors that already found by the Fantino 1998, Weber A, and Scramberg, in my own, there are other factors that can be one of factors too that make the word recognition as a complex process. I'd ask a limited mental lexicon or mental dictionary. For us who being a second language learner, we don't have a lot of vocabularies in our mental dictionary, which is there is no references in our mind regarding a lot of word in English. And those things become the factors that can make the process more complex for us, because when we hear something but we don't have a reference in our mind, we can find the appropriate word, or we cannot understand the word. As well, when in this perception stage, because we found such a strange word that not appropriate in our mental lexicon, as well as speed of the speech. This one another thing that can be being a factors in the process of word recognition. Why the speech sound specifically for whom that a second language learner. To illustrate my point, as some of people in the United States sometimes compound some word in the sentence become more simple word when they said like, what are you going to do? It will be more simple when they say, what you gonna do? For some people that not ever hear about it will feel strange or even can't understand it well and make the word recognition more complicated. Where? Well, next question. What do you know of the basis of word recognition? Explain your answer. There are three bases based on Frauenfelder and Tiller. Right? As the first one, the base of initial lexical contact. The best to begin word recognition based on the auditory input that has been segmented phonetically and phonologically makes initial contact with the mental lexicon. And the mental lexicon is variety. So that's why the function of initial contact that consists in the mental lexicon to consider a relevant words to represent the auditory input. And the next is the base of selection. Selection process occurs when relevant words have been chosen in mental lexicon. Then in this stage, we try to identify the appropriate word that related to represent the auditory input. The next one is the pace of integration. Last base in the word recognition, where the relevant word choose and the selection piece that interpret the meaning through the auditory input. In this space, we need to consider to match with grammatical aspect. Because in this case, we have to recognize what the relevant word to represent the auditory input and how when we use it in a sentence, so we can consider the grammatical aspect. Next question. What do you know of processing stage? What process takes place in the stage and what types knowledge does the mind need to go through the process? Processing stage has a process to assembling words together that have been recognized in the perception stage. The stage will attribute appropriate meaning of each word that perceived from auditory input to a sentence that can be understood and also acceptable in mind with well structure. In this stage, the process that takes place is sequential processing, where mind would recognize the relationship of each word in sentence to identify the meaning of the sentence that represent auditory input. So that's the function of sententical processing. Well, there are two knowledge that I need to consider in this stage. First, knowledge of articulatory. Knowledge of articulatory encoding refers to the recognition of the word stress and intonation, as well how words are produced. And second is linguistic encoding knowledge. They divide into two levels, namely functional level refers to the selecting lexical representation and consistent the grammatical relationship of the lexical. And the positional level refers to identifying the syntactic structure of sentence. Well, next question. What do you know interpretation stage and discourse processing? The final stage that the mind understands the meaning. It shows understanding of the speech heard when communicating. It also takes place in semantical aspect of speech about how the mind comprehends what the utterance delivers and the speech sound. Furthermore, discourse, discourse processing refers to how mind comprehend the speeches or text. Next question. What do you know of the three-party model in interpretation stage? Three-party model describes there are three levels of discourse processing. That is the first one, the surface level, where mind collects word, then assembles this word together into sentence that would be relevant to represent the meaning on the auditory input that we have perceived. And that we have received. And the next is the proportional level, the mind understanding the meaning of the language and morphosyntactic that trying to connect with prior knowledge to build inferences about the meanings of discourse. And the last one, the situational or mental level, reflecting the acquisition of successful comprehension where the mind has successfully inferred the meaning in speech effectively with combination of all linguistic knowledge. And the last question, Sam, can you explain the perception stage as a whole? Okay. Perception stage defined as a process in mind when receiving auditory input. Then the mind classifies the speech into abstract representation, also called auditory coding, where speech reaches our ears and processes in our mind. Here are the factors that influence endestation. Performance refers to how our ear perceives sound to be processed in mind, and competence refers to knowledge we have in our mental dictionary. So, in this process of perception stage, we would like to recognize the auditory input that we receive, and we try to find the abstract representation of the auditory input, and we make it more easier to perceive the sentences. Well, maybe that's all from me. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.